you have this graphic in your book, which I got done here. So now this is how we need to do it.
Yes.
As per you. Now,
Yes.
can you go one by one on
Yes.
these, please?
So these are the 4 pillars that I've actually outlined as a 4-pillar strategy for India to achieve 8% growth over the next 20-25 years. The first pillar is, macroeconomic focus on growth. The reason actually I've spent 5 chapters explaining this.
Yeah.
To show that, because in a country like ours, we need to grow the pie, and that basically a focus on growth basically will deliver that. And the reason it is important is many times people talk about, what about inequality? I agree, inequality is something that we have to focus on, but that actually I cover it in the second pillar, which is inclusive growth for a large middle class. This is social and economic inclusion, of which jobs are a real critical element. And I want to expand on this because if in a democracy, if we have to have support for good economic policy, then the benefits of good economic policy has to spread far and wide.
Because you talk about empowering entrepreneurs, you talk about responsible prosperity,
Correct.
You talk about several things in this, private investments.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the second, and I think that's where jobs are really critical, because the large middle class will get created when you have, economic inclusion, where you actually have, not only is the pie growing, but the benefits of that is reaching basically even to the lower middle class, who actually then grow to the, to middle class. And their jobs are really critical. So the second pillar in that, jobs, agriculture renaissance is really critical. Some of the, welfare spending that we do, I think doing it well is important. That's the second pillar. The third pillar is ethical wealth creation. And here, I want to spend some time explaining this, because this is oftentimes very misunderstood in India. We think about, and I think given our socialist past, typically we think about wealth as, and wealth creators as maybe as a necessary evil, not as ones that are actually, providing a big service to the country. And here I want to draw on, because we started out talking about my childhood and, so I want to give you a specific, anecdote, an example. So as I mentioned, we came from a lower middle class.
Can I interrupt you first?
Yes.
In page 179, which when you talk about the socialist past, about wealth creators being seen as evil. Today I've had a spat on Twitter about this. So I'm going to read out this one part in which you write, given India's socialist past, some of us perceive wealth creators and act of wealth creation as evil. Have you ever wondered who provides more jobs and thereby helps to sustain the livelihoods of families, the wealthy or the poor person? And then you go on to talk about the bane of dwarfism and its impact, where you say the significant impact of the curse of dwarfs on Indian economy, hindering both job creation and productivity. I'm just how you talk about small firms that have less than 99 employees. They account for 83% of all firms in India by number, and their share in employment is just 21.5%.
Correct.
And then you go on to say that dwarfs account for 58% of all firms in India, but the number and their share in employment is just 14.8%. The dwarfs remain the lowest per capita contributors to employment and productivity in the economy. So now you tell me about what the anecdote that you were talking about.
So that anecdote relates to the first part that you read out,
the
which
socialist
is,
part.
Thinking about wealth and wealth creators as essentially as evil, right?
Yeah.
So I want to give 2 specific, examples to anchor this. First, as I mentioned, I come from a lower middle class family. Some months we used to actually have a house help who would come and, help my mother actually, wash dishes for us. Now, this lady used to work not only in our family, but she used to work in 9 other families. In other words, a lower middle class family like us, which was not creating that much wealth, was providing 1/10 of a household help's job. Okay. In contrast, the jeweler, who was basically the richest man in our town, he had, between his business and his home, he used to have about 100 people working for him. And these were people who actually were earning much higher than the house help. He was creating wealth, of course, through his, At that time, actually, I didn't understand. Maybe I might have said things sort of not very flattering things about him. But as an economist, now I understand that, his wealth creation actually is providing so much jobs, 100 people. So in terms of quantity of jobs, the lower middle class family providing just 1/10 of a job, while the wealth creator providing 100 jobs means 1,000 times more wealth creation in quantity. Not just that, in quality, if you look at the wages, basically, those people were paid at least 5-6 times that of a house help. So that's my first example. Clearly see the correlation between
which is
wealth
mentioned in your book also.
yeah. Second, actually, and this is something which I say with absolute conviction, one of the things I've been very careful about is to not do any consulting for any industrialist, so that I can offer my independent thought. And with this, let me say, take any industrialist, XYZ, okay? Their wealth, are they actually stacking it as rupee bills in their pillows and their mattresses and sleeping on them? That's a question that I want to ask. They are putting it in companies. If you take any and I think this example I've put it elsewhere as well. Take Infosys, for instance, right? In the late 80s, when Infosys was started, basically 6 people had started the firm: Nandan Nilekani, Narayan Murthy sir, and Nandan Nilekani and others. Today they employ millions of people. Right? So it's a firm that actually, and they've created so much wealth. Or take any of the startups, for Swiggy, for instance. Today, because of Swiggy, there are so many people who are getting jobs who might have been possibly doing other...
Zomato, Flipkart,
I mean, we can keep talking about it, right? I think the point, and this is because there is a lot of rhetoric on this, and this rhetoric, especially political rhetoric, which demeans oftentimes wealth creators, and they do that only because most of us don't understand this nuance. If common people understand this nuance, that wealth creators actually also provide very important service in providing jobs.
Click here to watch the full episode.